the larger theme of this book is the fact that, we have always been taught history right from our growing up years with a sense of defeatism, with a sense that we are a nation of losers, that invaders kept coming from all parts of the world, and we kept falling prey to all of them, victim, and we lost wars. Labels nowadays don't bother me at all. I think the best way to discredit someone is to put a label on that. We are not items to be sold in a mall which has labels on it and what is our price to be picked. Characters of the past who are either misunderstood, maligned, forgotten. I always hold that more than me going looking for them, I think they come looking for me, for some kind of a redemption. So Veer Savarkar comes in that long list of people, I guess. There are two people who were actually civilizational warriors, in my view. Devi Ahilyabai Holkar and Rajarshi Bhagyachandra Jai Singh of Manipur, who did not jump into a battlefield and fight a war, but they kind of helped a cultural resurgence of this country. And first of all, there is no concept of a right wing and so on.
Right.
So it's a dharmic wing. So
Exactly.
if you want to be nationalistic and for that you need to face somebody's ire, I'm very happy to do that. To be nationalistic.
Hello, Vikram.
Hello, Ankur.
Welcome to Center for Indic Studies.
Thank you.
First, let me begin, first of all, by congratulating you on writing yet another brilliant historical work titled The Bravehearts of Bharat.
Thank you.
So, this book is largely about forgotten warriors of Indian culture, right? But before we discuss about this book, let me just start by asking you a little bit about your own journey and your motivations to embark on this journey of, let's say, rewriting the historical narrative of India. So you seem to have developed an expertise in writing historical biographies, be it from of Veer Savarkar or of various other historical personalities. Was this a conscious decision or did it take shape gradually over the years?
No, actually, if I attribute my literary as well as historical journey, I, attribute it to one word, which is serendipity, happy accidents. I must admit here that as a child, I don't think I liked history as a subject in school. Most history classes would mean kneel down outside because I think I just could not memorize who succeeded whom, which war was fought in which year, which is what through rote learning I think we learn our Indian history, unfortunately. But at that time, I don't know how many of your viewers would remember. This is the 90s, 1990s. There was a very popular television serial those days on Doordarshan, the only channel we all saw, called The Sword of Tipu Sultan, produced and directed by Mr. Sanjay Khan. He also played the role of Tipu in that. Now, if you remember, in that the Mysore royal family of the Vodeyars, it was shown in a very, very poor light. The Maharaja, Immadi Krishnaraja Vodeyar, was shown like this obese retard who was dancing along with the court dancer. The Maharani, the very, very sagacious Rani Lakshmi Ammani, she was portrayed as this typical vamp from one of those, Ekta Kapoor serials, was constantly conniving and conspiring against Tipu Sultan. And about that, there were protests in different parts of Karnataka, because though it's been 70 years after the royal family has ceased to exist, I think the people of southern Karnataka, which was part of the erstwhile Mysore kingdom, hold the Vodeyars in a lot of regard and reverence, because like Baroda or Travancore, the Mysore royal family was very, very progressive, and a lot of the foundations of modern Karnataka, the economic progress, the social, progress, and also the cultural osmosis that we see, cosmopolitan nature of Karnataka, was the building blocks of that were laid during the Wadiyar rule. So there was a lot of protest about that in different parts of the state. And as a young boy, I was probably 12 or 13 years old then. I was looking at all these protests, and as I said, though history academically, the way it was taught in school, was not something I liked, there was something about the protests and the tales that were doing the rounds. If you remember, there was also the studio had got burnt, and Sanjay Khan's own face was burnt, I think, and he had to have some plastic surgery for that. And there were local Kannada newspapers which were saying this is the curse of the Wadiyar. You know, you showed him in a poor light, so you're getting the karma back and all that. So as a young boy seeing all this, there was some element of curiosity to know the truth. I just don't know what that is. That's why I said it's a serendipity, it's a happy accident, it's some destiny playing its role. We have no family connections with Mysore, nothing of that sort. But from then on, it became an unending journey. Every vacation meant going to Mysore, visiting members of the royal family, the palace archives there, local historians, old timers, and just to get the truth behind the false representation of that one king and queen who were misrepresented in the serial. And this madness, Junoon, which was there, continued almost for 10 long years. Even as I was preparing for my, engineering entrance exams and +2 exams and all of that, Mysore was this, it was a bug that had bitten me. And every vacation meant going there. This was a self-motivated and more importantly, a self-funded exercise for a lower middle class, family to spend. I think I owe a lot to my parents who ensured that every vacation they took me there, they spent time with me. And over the 10 years, there was so much material that was gathered on the Wadiyars, who ruled one of the longest reigning royal houses of India. They ruled for 600 years from 1399, even when the Vijayanagar Empire was there, till 1947 when India got freedom. There was just a 40-year interregnum period of Hyder and Tipu Sultan. After which the kingdom was restored to the Wadiyars. So there was, I was quite dismayed that despite such a long span of time and despite so many contributions and achievements to their credit, there was not a single book in modern times which had been written to document their entire story, the political, the social, the cultural evolution of Mysore as a state. And so that is, there's this famous quote of Toni Morrison who says that if there is a book that you want to read and it hasn't been written yet, you must be the first one to write it. So I think a lot of my, friends and well-wishers, they suggested that you've gathered so much material. So why don't you put all of this together in the form of a book?
Okay.
So that is how completely coincidentally and with some supreme forces working somewhere else, this book came out in 2008 called Splendors of Royal Mysore, the untold story of the Wadiyars. And it was untold because nobody had bothered to tell that story. And then one led to the other. So after I thought this is just going to be a one-time wonder, and I'm going to go back into my regular life of, engineering, MBA, a corporate career that I was stuck in, hated it to the core. So I thought it's just going to end there. But once again, destiny, I think, has very different plans for you.
True.
Sometimes you should just let life happen to you rather than over plan, overthink what's going to happen tomorrow, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. You just don't know what's going to happen the next moment.
Right.
So I think a sense of surrender to the larger forces which have your best interest in mind than all the micro planning that you can do to every millisecond. I think that is very important. And that's what I've done. I've just gone with the flow, not knowing where the river will take me. And that's where I am sitting in front of you today.
Wonderful, wonderful. It's very interesting that you didn't plan to become a historian.
Yeah.
It happened along the way,
Stages.
in stages. And things one thing led to another.
Yeah.
That's very interesting to know. So you told us about why you decided to write about the warriors of Mysore in the first book. Now coming to your second book that is published in 2010, this is a biography of Gauhar Jaan, who was India's first classical musician to record on the gramophone. Now, this is interesting because having written about a royal family, you now decided to write about a musician.
Yeah.
And then even your third book was on Veena Maestro S. Balachandar. So it's an interesting choice about having to write about different, a completely different genre. I would say. How would you think about it?
Uh, well, I was a single child, a very, very shy and introverted person then as I am now. Didn't have too many friends. And I think the major gift that my parents and my maternal grandmother gave to me in my growing up years was a love for reading, a lot of books. And my interest to read outside the school textbook was always history. And the other gift, which I'm very grateful to them for, is classical music. I think when I was 4 or 5 years old, my grandmother enrolled me in Carnatic classical vocal music, and so music and literature, as that famous Sanskrit quotation shlok goes,
Yes.
that without music and sangeet or sahitya ke bina,
Yeah.
you are like a pashu without a tail and horns. You're
Yes.
worse than
Yes.
that.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I also shudder to think what a beast I would have grown up to become if not for these twin gifts that destiny gave. So music was very much part of my growing up years. It still continues to be. But Gauhar Jaan again was another serendipity.
Hmm.
I never planned to write about her. I didn't know who she was.
Hmm.
But while researching on the Vodayars in the very, very meticulously catalogued Mysore Palace archives, there was a box file, very thin, slim box file of letters of various visiting musicians who came to the Mysore court. Now, under the Vodayars, the Mysore court was a kind of a melting pot of various cultures. So, not only Carnatic music, but also Hindustani musicians, Abdul Karim Khan and Barakatullah Khan on the sitar, and also Carnatic musicians from other parts of South India, Ariyakudi Ramanuja Iyengar or Veena Dhanammal. All these people were invited to Mysore. Western classical music was also part of the Mysore court. There were lots of fusion, experiments that were done between Western music and Carnatic instrumental music. All this was encouraged by the court. So I had this box file of letters of visiting musicians, and a few letters that were there were of this lady called Gauhar Jaan, and it probably had a paragraph, small paragraph of her biographical details that she was India's first superstar and a gramophone celebrity, born in Azamgarh, born actually of a Hindu grandmother, a British grandfather, an Armenian Christian father, someone who was baptized as Angelina Yovard in Allahabad's Holy Trinity Church. And later, her mother and after the parents divorce, the mother moves away, to Banaras, where they convert to Islam. The mother becomes Badi Malka Jan, and she becomes Gauhar Jan. They become courtesans in the court of Nawab Wajid Ali Shah when he is exiled to Calcutta. And so very few lines were there about her. Now, she, in the last years of her life, she spent in Mysore, the last 2 years, but they were, from the superstar status, she was reduced to literally begging the Maharaja's government for extra salary. Please don't cut income tax, increase my income. So those kind of letters were there. And, in typical official Babudam, across the letter, rejected was the things put on the letter. And suddenly she dies in 1930, 17th of January. And those papers were there. After she died, she owed the Maharaja's government a lot of money. There were washermen, baker, medicine wala. Everybody was giving bills saying, "You, this lady has not paid us back." So there was something about her. I realized that a great artist who was a celebrated artist of her times, she had been reduced to a state of penury and came to this level. So, on an instant, again, not knowing exactly how I'm going to do it or why I have to do it, I decided I think this story deserves to be told, and I need to research about her. Now, here was a Tawaif, courtesan, no legal heirs, no known students, nothing. No family, nothing is known about her, and she died in 1930. I think when I came across her, it was 2004 or 5, so several decades after that. No idea how this was to happen. But then over the next 4 or 5 years, I think I went on a Sherlock Holmes chase of this woman, literally chasing her from the length and breadth of India. Azamgarh, where she was born, Banaras, where she lived and converted and lived there, Calcutta, which was a part of her life. She was known as Gauhar Jan Kalkatte Wali. Then Mysore, Chennai, Mumbai, Darbhanga, Rampur, all parts of India where she had a significant imprint, and also outside India, Berlin and London. Berlin because, as I said, she was the first recorded artist of the gramophone company, and you had a German recording agent who came to India in 1902, William Gaisberg, Frederick William Gaisberg. So I managed to somehow trace his family, then got the diary jottings of Gaisberg in which he describes how his experience of bargaining with her, how she came to the studio and recorded all these details. So it was literally like putting together pieces of a jigsaw puzzle to reconstruct the life of this very, very fantastic artist. And one thing that I also discovered in the course of this journey, Ankur, was that when recording technology came to India in 1902 from London, across India, it was actually women who embraced it. The men folk actually stayed away from recording. There were a lot of superstitions that if you record into that evil English instrument, you will lose your voice or the gods will be displeased and all of that. But across India, north, south, east, west, you had women, most of them belonging to the Tavaif and the Devdasi traditions, who actually recorded, and their stories too had been completely forgotten in modern times. So that's how the research of this book, which my name is Gauhar Jaan, the life and times of a musician, that came about. Uh, Incidentally, that came at the time when My Name is Khan had come out, the Karan Johar film. So a lot of people thought this was a marketing gimmick to say My Name is Gauhar Jan, was very rhyming with that, but that was not the case, because they used to record in India. The master recording used to be done in India in different rudimentary studios by the gramophone company, and all the shellac discs would then be shipped all the way to Germany, Hanover in Germany, where the pressing would be done and manufacture would be done. So every artist had to announce their name at the end of the recording, saying, "My name is this. My name is Gauhar Jan. There was Janki Bai of Allahabad. Mera naam Janki Bai Allahabad." They would announce that. So the technician there would listen to the entire recording, identify the artist with this announcement, and based on that, multiple copies would be stamped with the label and sent back to India for sales. So I thought she was telling the story of her life through my work, and so the title of the book should be My Name is Gauhar Jan. And that book, in a way, sitting in that library in Mysore, the Palace Archive, I never thought, this book is going to literally change my life, or she is going to change my life in some way, and she did. At that time, I could have thought, like, a lot of authors today, will it sell? Will it become bestseller? The marketing strategies, all this they keep thinking of. I think more important than all of that is, as a writer, as a historian, as a researcher, you should have the courage of conviction that this is a story that is dying to be told, irrespective of whether it will make commercial success or not. In my case, I took the plunge, literally searched for that needle in a haystack, and the outcome was something I never expected. The book won the Sahitya Academy Award. It also gave me a chance to go to different universities, both within India and outside, to talk about this work and this whole phenomenon of technology and how its interface happened, East meets the West, in the field of classical music at the turn of the 20th century, and what were the negotiations and the interventions that happened because of that. And quite serendipitously again, I was giving a talk like this on her and the whole recording journey in the University of Queensland in Australia. And the professors, the head of departments of history and music and all these departments were there in the audience. And they came up and said, "You've done so much work. So why don't you put all of this together in the form of a, PhD, which you can do out of our university?"
Okay.
And so once again, out of complete happy accident, that turned out. And back home, I also established probably what is India's first digital sound archive for vintage gramophone recordings, called the Archive of Indian Music,
Okay.
with the help of philanthropists like Mr. T.V. Mohandas Pai, and later the Infosys Foundation and Srimati Sudha Murthy and others.
Okay.
So the idea was, when I wanted to analyze Gauhar's music And as a student of music myself, I wanted to hear her voice.
Hmm.
But if you want to listen to those 78 RPM records, today there is no device.
Hmm.
The that gramophone 78 RPM
Hmm.
turntable is out of
Right.
manufacture. The needle is not there.
Hmm.
Most of those records itself are found in chor bazaars, raddi shops, kabadi ka dukan.
Hmm.
This is where you would find it.
Hmm.
Now, on a fellowship, I had gone to Berlin once, and keeping Berlin as a base, I visited archives across Europe.
Hmm.
You know, the in Berlin, in Paris, in London, and Vienna, and all these places. And something very shocking there, which I found. One was all of them had the concept of a national sound archive. Second thing was there were a lot of recordings of India which were preserved and kept there, not only of music but also voices. You know, in Germany, for instance, in Berlin, there was an archive called the Laut Archive, where the about 120 voices of prisoners of war, Indian prisoners of war of
Hmm.
the First World War, who were in German camps, were all maintained there.
Okay.
When Tagore went to give a speech at Heidelberg University, I think, where you studied,
Hmm.
his speech was also recorded and kept
Okay.
there. Lala Hardayal, who formed the Gadar party, his speeches were all there in these places. And all the people there, the archivists used to keep asking me, doesn't India have a sound archive, national sound archive? And you know, as an Indian and as a student of both history and music, it was deeply embarrassing to say we don't have one such institution.
Hmm.
This was 2010, and I came back. I tried to ask the government of India to, set up such an institution, and that I'd help voluntarily. But governments never help, and that's when Mr. Mohandas Pai said, "Forget governments. You set up something as a private entity, and
Hmm.
I'll give the seed funding." So we imported all the machines to digitize these
Wow.
records, and
Okay.
today we've rescued about 15,000 gramophone discs from chor bazaars and raddi shops,
Wow.
spanning Carnatic and Hindustani classical music, folk music,
Hmm.
early theatre recordings of the
Hmm.
Bal Gandharva, the Marathi Natya Sangeet, and that entire era, Bengali theatre,
Wonderful.
Tamil and Telugu theatre, and all of that.
Hmm.
Early cinema of the Sehgal and the Devika Rani, that whole
Hmm.
era, and also voices of leaders. Mahatma
Hmm.
Gandhi, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose's address to to Indians from Tokyo,
Oh.
that was also there. So all these on gramophone
Wow.
records, totally, lying somewhere uncared for, unattended.
Hmm.
So we've digitized all of that, and it's now for your listeners on SoundCloud. If you actually
Okay.
type Archive of Indian Music, about 5,000 tracks or something are free of cost. You can sit and access that
Hmm.
from the confines of your house.
Okay.
And these date back to 1902. So more than
Hmm.
120-year-old, recordings which are there. So the larger point that I was trying to make was from that one book, from that one incident of finding this lady's letters in a
Hmm.
palace library. I didn't know that there could be so many different,
Hmm.
pathways that would
Hmm.
create. An archive would come out of it, a
Hmm.
PhD would come out of it, and a award would come, critical acclaim, all of that. So, as I said, as an answer to your first question too, I think I've learned increasingly the power of surrender, the
Hmm.
power of not planning things and just being in the present moment and going with the flow.
It was that one spark to find out about Gauhar Jaan that
Yeah,
led to so many things
yeah,
one after
yeah,
another. So
yeah,
it was also a happy combination of various circumstances and your own training as a classical musician, and then your uh, further training as a historian that led to all these things, right?
yeah. True,
Interesting,
true.
interesting. Now, your fourth book, which was a two-volume biography on Veer Savarkar, the well-known thinker and freedom fighter. The first volume was published in 2019
Yeah.
and the second one came out in 2021, right?
Yes.
This two-part biography of Savarkar, published by Penguin, I believe, is undoubtedly an extremely important work considering that there is no previous comprehensive biography of Savarkar. And given that his legacy is as influential, perhaps equally influential as Gandhi's or Tagore's, if not more. So please tell us something about why you chose to write about Savarkar.
So once again, I don't know the characters of the past who are either misunderstood, maligned, forgotten. uh, I always hold that more than me going looking for them, I think they come looking for me, to for some kind of a redemption. So Savarkar, Veer Savarkar comes in that long list of people, I guess. Because coming from a half Maharashtrian background, my mother was a Maharashtrian. In my maternal house, there was a lot of talk in hushed tones about Savarkar all the time. So I knew that this person existed. But I think in growing up years, in our history books, textbooks, there was no mention. I studied in CBSE, and so there was no mention of Savarkar in those days, nor even of the cellular jail where he was lodged along with several other revolutionaries. But I knew that he existed. But I think my first brush with him was when Mr. Vajpayee's government decided to put his portrait in the Central Hall of Parliament, on which there was a huge hullabaloo where the Congress and others they created ruckus saying it should not find its place there. Then, of course, Mr. Ram Naik of that government had got a plaque in Savarkar's honor in Kalapani, which 1 year later, when the UPA came to power, Mani Shankar Iyer got it thrown away and hurled a lot of invectives about the man. So, in jest, I mentioned several times that the 2 volume biography of Savarkar, I think I should dedicate it to Mani Shankar Iyer, because that was when this interest was further rekindled. I started getting more focused about reading about the man, and I kept reading on and off. I think around 2012, 13, the manner in which Savarkar intruded contemporary politics, and particularly after 2014, where election rallies he is invoked. Election manifestos have this thing that we'll give Bharat Ratna to him. Someone will say we don't want to give, and so on. So, and Rahul Gandhi is mocking him. There's a defamation suit flying somewhere from the Savarkar family on him and others. State governments are spending valuable time in Rajasthan and Chhattisgarh saying we should have the prefix of Veer or remove it and all these things. And the Prime Minister is going to cellular jail. That iconic image of him sitting in meditation in front of Savarkar's photo. All this is going on. But for a young person today, a young Indian boy or girl who wants to know what is all this noise and fuss about, who is this man, what is his relevance in today's conversations, apart from the a comprehensive biography of his written in the 1960s by Dhananjay Keer, there was no attempt made to revisit and also reevaluate the man, his legacy, his works, which were copious. And he wrote largely in Marathi, a language which was his mother tongue. He wrote thousands of pages of literature, which is available, which are compiled in the Savarkar Samagra Vangmay, where he talks about a host of things. And he was a journalist, he was a playwright, he was an amateur historian, he was a poet, he was many things. But mainstream historians, either out of their ignorance of Marathi or out of malicious intents, they never really accessed his primary writings itself. So again, I thought, this is a book I want to read, and it has not been written, so you should write it. Right. So over 5 to 6 years of research, which also meant not only accessing the original Marathi document, which luckily since I understand the language, it was easier, but also archives outside India. Just one visit to the British archives and the British Library in London, over 3 weeks, I think I collected something like 40,000 pages of documents on the entire Savarkar trials that happened there in the 5 years that he lived there as a student of law. Original documents of Madan Lal Dhingra's execution, how the revolutionary movement was, being controlled there, surveillance reports of Scotland Yard. All these are available in archives. As a senior research fellow at Nehru Memorial Museum and Library, I got access to the Savarkar private papers, which are on microfilms. There are about 45 microfilms. Since he was under surveillance, both during British period and by Nehru's government, both before and after independence, every letter that went in and out of Savarkar's house was intercepted, and a copy of it would be there. So all those letters chronologically from 1924 onwards are there on the microfilms. If you go there to the microfilm section and see the register, hardly accessed by anybody.
Okay.
And so, the whole idea is, and still, this is a man who is so important, whose ideology of Hindutva is something that is in the political ascent today. And people are invoking him rightly, wrongly. Those who support him also have not read him. Those who oppose him have certainly not read him. So, I think it becomes the responsibility of a historian then to illuminate the archives, to throw light and show truth as he finds it or she finds it, and let the public then make up their mind, as to where their opinion, shifts and rests. Because I've always held that you may love to love somebody, you may love to hate someone, but your love or hatred for that person should be informed. It should not be based on misrepresentation, rhetoric, misinformation, ignorance, or political considerations. So read Savarkar, read what he has to say. If you, after reading that, if you still don't agree with him, that's perfectly a logical position to hold. So I think that is why these two volumes on Savarkar came out.
That's very interesting. And working on Savarkar's biography must have been a really interesting choice, considering that he's often hailed as a right-wing icon. Did you face any such challenges while working on him, or believe that you might be branded as being politically right or being linked in any way to RSS or BJP?
No, labels nowadays don't bother me at all. I think the best way to discredit someone is to put a label on that. We are not items to be sold in a mall which has labels on it and what is our price to be picked. Despite that, on social media or on other places, your Sanghi and this and that's almost used like a cuss word. Now, I've not even attended an RSS Shakha. I don't even know what happens there, but still you're called all these names. It really doesn't matter. And first of all, there is no concept of a right wing and so on.
Right.
So it's a dharmic wing. So
Exactly.
if you want to be nationalistic and for that you need to face somebody's ire, I'm very happy to do that, to be nationalistic. So it's fine, but earlier it used to bother me, but now it just doesn't matter. Repercussions. I know that if you write about a person like Savarkar and you bring out truths which have been tried very hard to be suppressed over so many decades, naturally the establishmentarians are going to push back.
Yeah.
There is going to be a fight back, claiming the turf. Which would happen. This is a fortress that has been well guarded and kept for so long.
Yeah.
So someone coming from the outside and throwing, missiles at you, there is going to be counter missiles. So that is expected. But labelings and this and that, yeah, it's fine. Some call you left and right and whatever. I think best is to say I am on the path of, for every honest researcher to think for themselves that I am on the path of the truth, and I'm on the truth wing, and on the India wing. So that's all that matters.
But coming more to this reactions and the labelings part, so I really admire your courage, considering that you have waged a long battle with so many academicians, journalists, and ideologues. Was this a consequence of the publication of the book on Savarkar, and that you were viciously attacked after this? And it would be really encouraging for us to, if you could share your ordeal with us.
Oh my God, you certainly don't want to hear that. There's enough of all of that on the online space.
Yeah.
No, but as I said, it was expected. But I didn't know that the extent and the nature would be so vitriolic. Particularly after the second volume came out, there were concerted series of attacks that were done. First, for a long time, it was very difficult to find fault in the content of the book. Then they will discredit the person. What is your credential? What the person may have a PhD, but that's not enough. Someone of their camp need not even have any degree, but still they are hailed as the next best thing in the world of scholarship. And then the whole aura is built around that person. Media will give you spaces to write articles. They will build you up little by little. You will be the toast of town in literature festivals. Then finally, the scholar has arrived, and that person need not even have a training in history, nothing, but that is accepted. Here, even after doing everything, and after publishing so many books, after having earned a PhD degree. It was not an honorary degree that someone gave. 4 years of struggle in Australia. Still, every time you're called upon to prove your worth, so which is very, very unfortunate. It's fine. In this space, I think Sita has to give her, Agni Pariksha every second day, which is perfectly acceptable. Um, they discrediting the person, and then various allegations, etc., that were leveled, for which I said enough is enough, and dragged some certain people to court as well, saying that's the only way to shut all these people up. Wouldn't want to talk much about that since it is sub judice, but nonetheless, yeah, thus far and no further. But till then, even a CPI ML, some Naxal paper also in their this one, what is that called? Rag magazine. They had so-called historians who were teaching in some university, unknown people who were writing reviews every day, punching holes. This methodology is wrong. That is wrong. This is right. And you have referred only to Savarkar's own works. Whereas anybody who has the book and sees the footnotes, I think on social media someone did a comparison and said, even the biographies of Gandhi, if you're reading about that person, you have to go to the own man's writings on many aspects. A first person account is a very important source in a biography, and that's understood. It's a very well accepted school of French historiography, for instance, which relies on first person accounts. But here, that is, first of all, it is not true. There have been multiple sources. There has been a triangulation of facts, but despite that, all these canards are spread, and you just say a lie, and then all the loonies will come and amplify that lie and keep talking about that lie 100 times on social media, on other media, and all of that, and then that starts assuming the truth. By the time, there's that saying, na, by the time the truth has even tried to tie the lace of its shoe, the lie has crossed the whole world and come back. So that is exactly how lies and gobblician propaganda works, which is perfectly fine. So this is an ongoing, struggle, and I don't know. I have more lined up. A biography of Tipu Sultan and so on, which I plan to do, which will ruffle more feathers, but not going to give up, because if the idea is to shut the person down, I'm sorry, I don't think they realize that I'm made of sterner stuff.
Great. Really, I'm glad to know that. And now coming to this part of being an independent researcher and not being affiliated with any academic institution as such, like not being a professor, how does this affect your scholarship? Because uh, you may have sometime thought about joining some institution, maybe as a full-time tenure track academic professor,
Right.
or did you not think about it? Or and what are the advantages and disadvantages of not being in the academics as opposed to being in the academics?
I've been actually so many offers that had been coming my way for university position, but I've actually rejected them only because I had a very brief tenure in an academic institution, and it was more in the administrative, role. And I was looking and managing things which are basically, so mundane, administrative, nothing to do with scholarly work, and it was eating into all my time of my waking hours, and somehow, like we were discussing the other day, I think academy itself, by its very definition, has a boundary, has a certain parameter within which you're supposed to operate. Being an independent researcher gives you that access. You can break boundaries. You're not answerable to anybody. You don't have to conform to any established norms that anybody is setting for you, and still produce scholarly work. And you have more time at your disposal. You don't have teaching responsibilities. You don't have admin responsibilities too. So those have been advantages, which is why I've consciously tried to stay away. But I've also taken adjunct positions, faculty positions in universities, particularly abroad, and that gives me the better part of access to databases, access to libraries, which I think are the plus points of
Right,
having
right, right.
academic positions.
Yeah.
So you can have balance it out with a little bit best of both worlds. plus those short-term, engagements of talking to young students and understanding. I think that greatly has helped also how I write, because finally what you write, it can become so dense and so inaccessible. It can adorn a university library till the cows come home to graze.
Hmm.
But if nobody is reading that book, then what is the point of writing it?
Hmm.
What is the point of the scholarship if every day the librarian has to go and dust the book?
Hmm.
Finally, a book success is measured by how many people are imbibing all the knowledge that is there in that. So, my interactions with young people give me that opportunity to see what is it that kindles their interest, so the writing style can be a little more accessible for them. The research should be meticulous, it should be foolproof, but then that can become history can be told in a manner that is interesting, that is exciting, that is also inspiring. It need not be dull and pedantic and boring in a manner that puts off people. I think that is an important takeaway for me personally.
Let us now look at the larger civilizational picture. Here, I believe your work is an important contribution because it's part of a long overdue initiative of correcting a rather distorted narrative of history. Uh, how do you see your own work in the larger civilizational battle of narratives?
I wouldn't want to comment on my own work that way. I think it's for the readers and maybe future generations to assess if at all, I've even moved the needle by a micromillimeter.
Mhm.
I'd consider myself very, very fortunate
Okay.
because otherwise, as I said, my whole idea is with a very clear conscience
Mm.
and with hand held on heart. Trying to bring out stories
Mhm.
and facts of history which have either been willfully or otherwise suppressed.
Mhm.
What impact that would have? Would it have any impact at all? Would it have a role in that larger picture that you mentioned? I don't think it's for me to assess at all.
Okay. Now, in this book, Bravehearts of Bharat, you have covered a wide range of historical personalities, ranging from Rajendra Chola to Ahilyabai Holkar. Is there a common theme that connects all these different persons?
Right. So yes, the larger theme of this book is the fact that we have always been taught history right from our growing up years with a sense of defeatism, with a sense that we are a nation of losers,
Hmm.
that invaders kept coming from all parts of the world, and we kept falling prey to all of them, victim, and we lost wars. So all the wars that it's a laundry list of wars that we memorize by heart, where India and Indians actually lost. But today, if we are still alive and kicking, as probably one of the only pre-Bronze era civilizations, there must have been some wars we won also.
Hmm.
There must have been some courage that our ancestors also put. So then, why are those stories hidden from us? Why have they not been told to us? Why do those names also don't ring a bell in the minds of young Indians today? That was something that was very, very, it's plaguing. And also the entire Delhi centricity of our historiography, where large parts of India, be it southern India or the northeast of India, doesn't get featured with prominence that it deserves, and also the role of women in our larger historiography. So all these problems, there are numerous problems with Indian historiography. These were some of them, and through this book, I've tried to address those. So all the 15 people, first of all, there are 8 men and 7 women,
Hmm.
almost an equal gender balance, and they come from all parts of India.
Hmm.
Traditionally, regions which are ignored by mainstream history,
Hmm.
Assam, Manipur, Kashmir, Punjab,
Hmm.
Gujarat,
Hmm.
and all the 4 South Indian states,
Hmm.
among others. So that was the idea. The common theme, string among all of them was being civilizational warriors, resistance, courage, not only physical resistance, not only military prowess. There are 2 people who were actually civilizational warriors, in my view. Devi Ahilyabai Holkar and Rajarshi Bhagyachandra Jai Singh of Manipur, who did not jump into a battlefield and fight a war, but they kind of helped a cultural resurgence of this country, and that's why that is equally important as military prowess and military achievements are, in my view. So that's the common theme of all these 15 people.
And when we talk about civilizational warriors, as you're saying, you use the term civilizational renaissance
Oh,
in two chapters of
yeah,
this book. One was in the case of Ahilyabai Holkar and how she reconstructed so many temples and gave grants
yeah,
and in different parts of the country. And then you use this term civilizational renaissance in the chapter on Rajarishi Bhagya Chandra Jai Singh, who contributed in his own way by starting this new
yes,
form of dance and introducing Vaishnavism also.
right.
Do you interpret this term in different ways? The term civilizational renaissance, and could you please elaborate more on this?
Yeah, so Renaissance is a very, I mean, broadly used
Loaded
term.
term, yeah,
Yeah, in the European context it means something else.
yeah.
But I think the larger idea is the common theme for both these people or people like that would be resurgence. You could say in several decades, centuries before, Adi Shankaracharya scripted a renaissance of his own in the manner in which he integrated the whole nation, a common sphere of cultural circulation that existed across north, south, east, west. A man who came from a little village in Kerala, and he probably didn't live too long. I think in his 30s, he left. So he could have very well been there and been a precocious, prolific writer that he was, a Sanskrit scholar. But he chose to cross the entire length and breadth of India and establish these mathas at the four cardinal points. Why north, south, east, west? Almost to match the today's political borders of what Bharat is. That was a kind of a resurgence. That is also civilizational resurgence. And Devi Ahilyabai Holkar, I think, almost mirrored that same
Right.
zeal to revive at a time when society was in decadence, when British imperialism was almost reaching its peak with the East India Company winning so many battles. You had the Marathas on a downward trend after the third battle of Panipat. So at that stage, for a woman, a widowed queen, to actually do what she did and unite all these the entire country through this common, very intangible, subtle thread of civilization. I think that's such an important lesson for everybody. And so to all those people who keep saying, India was not even a nation, it was the British who gave us the concept of an idea of a country and all that. Uh, Stories like this of a
Yes.
Renaissance men and women,
Yeah.
I think that's a perfect answer.
Yeah.
Because when Shankaracharya went on his Digvijaya, no, people didn't say you are from Kerala, so you can't enter Kashmir and establish the Sarvagnya Peeth there, or you can't enter Puri, you can't come to Sringeri. Nobody said that. Our ancestors undertook pilgrimages in very difficult circumstances, crossing various kingdoms and borders. People could walk around. What was that common thread? How did they communicate with each other? What language did they use? And even the manner in which our ancestors, I think we have the different concept of the Shakti Pithas, where it is scattered across the country, or the Jyotirlingas, or the seven, Puris, according to the Garud Puran, or the Char Dhams. So there is a splattering across the entire length and breadth of this sacred geography which we call Bharatvarsh, which unites us in a manner which goes beyond the definition of political boundaries and borders. Remember that political territories and borders can keep changing.
Yeah.
What this subcontinent was in 1946 is not what it is today. What Andhra Pradesh was, 10 years ago, today it's been divided. So, like that, that can keep changing. But that intangible definition of what binds this entire landmass, what makes all of this a sacred geography, I think that is that
Civilization.
intangible civilization, and people who bring that spirit back in times of wane. I think those are the Renaissance men and women, and they create that resurgence. They could be political characters like the ones featured in this book,
Hmm.
or they could be spiritual masters. They could be, like Adi Shankaracharya to Sri Aurobindo to Ramana Maharshi to all the other greats who we've
Yes.
had. It's an unending stream of several people who try to emphasize on these points that bind all of us together as one civilization, thereby one nation.
Hmm. And from time to time, this kept happening.
Yes,
The people who came for spiritual and civilizational renaissance, they kept coming from
yes,
time to time.
true.
So our history textbooks, our history books should give more
Yes.
attention to the civilizational warriors, so to say, rather than just the political
Yeah,
uh,
true. Well, even
warriors.
the political is not emphasized. We are only talking of our history through the eyes of
Right,
our invaders.
right,
We only learn about everyone who invaded this country.
right, right.
We seldom talk about who were the people who pushed back.
Hmm.
Even when Muhammad Ghazni, tried to attack so many times,
Hmm.
we are almost made to believe that he had a free pass.
Hmm.
17 times he kept coming. So nobody here really tried to push back and do anything. You had the Kabul, the Hindu kingdoms of Kabul, the Shahi rulers,
Hmm.
Jaypala, Anandpala, Trilochanpala, that
Hmm.
entire dynasty.
Hmm.
And then there was this man called Nidar Bhima, who was, I think, Trilochanpala's son.
Hmm.
These people made Mahmud Ghazni's life miserable. Every time
Hmm.
came, he had to
Yes.
go with a lot of
Yeah.
difficulty. And
Hmm.
even when he came to Gujarat,
Hmm.
the Chalukyas gave him a tough time
Yes.
many a
Yes.
times. Even after the destruction of the Somnath Mandir,
Hmm.
the manner in which common Hindus actually guarded their civilization,
Yeah.
their faith, that
Yes.
is something that is seldom spoken about.
Yes.
Forget military, forget rulers and what
Yeah.
they did. When he came through this very area of
Yeah.
Gujarat,
Yeah.
Ahmedabad, Karnavati, which
Yeah.
was established by the Chalukyan king
Yes.
Karnaraja.
Yes. Karnadev.
Yeah, his predecessor Bhim Deva,
Hmm.
he had run away
Hmm.
from Patan,
Hmm.
and Muhammad Ghazni had a free pass to go to Somnath,
Hmm.
and he was quite astonished to see 50,000 common Hindus who were actually guarding the fortress of Somnath,
Hmm.
and it took him 3 days to kill all of them. He couldn't immediately enter the Garbhagriha.
Hmm.
For 3 days he had to fight them. There was a bloodbath. All of them were killed, and that is when he finally managed to go in and desecrate Somnath. After he desecrates it,
Hmm.
on his way back to Ghazni, again common Hindus appeared in front of him, posing as
Guide.
guides,
Yeah.
and tried to misguide him.
Yes.
He and his army were in dire need of water. So
Hmm.
they said, "We'll take you. We are guides. We'll local guides. We'll show you where the water body is." And they took him into all the interiors of deserts and so on. And later on, he got suspicious and caught him and said, "What are you doing with us?" And then the fellow, confesses that you destroyed our Jyotirlinga. So
Hmm.
we wanted to take revenge. And we wanted to misguide you and kill you by hunger and thirst.
Hmm.
And of course, he was done away with. But the fact is that that spirit of that Kshatriya spirit, that warrior spirit, was very much a part of our, culture, a part of our ethos,
Hmm.
which over the centuries and so many invasions, and particularly in the during the freedom movement and the whole pacifism, somewhere lost sight of it, saying almost violence, proactive violence is bad. But violence to defend yourself when you are under attack, I think that's a perfectly legitimate strategy that anybody can. This thing, you can't keep giving your other cheek all the time. If someone slaps you, you have
Right.
to slap back, so that the slap itself doesn't come ever.
Right.
So I
Right.
think
Right.
that warrior spirit is equally important. So even that is not covered. So
Hmm.
the spiritual aspect is too far fetched for
Right.
anyone to actually cover in the larger narrative or the
Right.
discourse of what Indian history is.
Right. 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 It's not just textbooks that are problematic. Cities, roads, gardens, monuments, various places, various kinds of public places are named after the very people who wreaked havoc in India. From Bakhtiyarpur, named after Bakhtiyar Khilji, who sacked the University of Nalanda in 1197, to Aurangzeb Road, named after the Mughal tyrant Aurangzeb, whose atrocities are well known. There's a long list of such places, even though since the arrival of PM Modi, some places have been renamed to their original names. But do you think this phenomena of having so many public places named after the invaders and after people who massacred our ancestors, is this a phenomena that is unique to India, or do we see any parallel of this anywhere in the world? Any other example of any other civilization or culture that glorifies its enemies?
No, I think it's a singular Indian achievement.
Okay.
But world over, I think former colonies, particularly from the same time that we got independence, there were so many colonies around that same time, right? 1940 to 60, which won freedom. All of them, there was this large wave of what is popular now called decolonization, where it is a process of reclamation. Reclamation of what? Reclamation of your language, reclamation of your culture, your history, your traditions, in the manner that you would want to see it and evaluate it, not through someone else's lens, or someone else is not teaching you how to look at all of this from the outside. More worse, your colonial masters. So we had this decolonization, waves in different countries,
Right.
including China, which scripted its own grand Chinese narrative. What were we doing for the 5,000 years that we existed? Did we contribute anything to world knowledge? Did we contribute to humanity and so on? But somehow in India, that wave has come very belated. So we still go on with those old names and so on. It took so long to actually put Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose's, statue at
Kartavya Path.
Kartavya Path now, which was Rajpath till some months back. I think it's more than symbolism. The very fact that that was a place, Queen's Way and King's Way, and all that, where our Emperor George V was standing there, the actual person whose efforts led to dislodging him
Yes.
politically,
Yes.
to have his
Exactly.
statue there, I think it's a huge,
Absolutely.
symbolic nonetheless. But that is symbolisms are what make much more deeper imprint in the long run. So I think now the trend is reversing. Sometimes it gets stretched to a lot of ridiculous everything. There's a lot of friction and tension. I think there is a need to also educate why these changes become necessary. Like you mentioned, Bakhtiyarpur. Here was a marauder who came and vandalized your seat of learning. When he burnt it, it is said manuscripts burnt for 6 months.
Yeah.
There was so much of wealth that was destroyed. No other country in the world would celebrate a person who destroyed their Stanford and Oxford and Princetons of their country. But we do it. And we don't. And if you change it, then you are called revisionist, supremacist, communal, Hindutva, and all kinds of other names. Which I think once it's explained in a manner which a common person can understand, then I think these changes will become more acceptable and palatable to people.
Okay. Let's hope that we have better times to come and
Yeah.
our roads are renamed.
Yeah.
So the historical personalities covered in this book fought very bravely against a variety of hostile enemies, whether it was the early Islamic invaders, the Arabs, the Turks, then the Mughals, and later on the Dutch, the Portuguese, and the British. It's interesting to see such a vast period of history, right from the 700 CE to up till the modern time, being covered in one single book. Because normally you have books on ancient history or medieval history or modern history. So, as a researcher and a historian, you might have had to deal with a variety of sources in various languages, including Sanskrit, Persian, French, maybe other languages also. How was that a challenge?
Yeah, it was a huge challenge, to be honest.
Yeah.
So this is not my area of research. I restrict my work and research largely to early modern and modern Indian history.
Okay.
Only because I think to be an honest historian of ancient India, you can't do that if you don't understand Sanskrit.
Right, absolutely.
Though we have historians in India who are eminent, who openly claim we don't know any Sanskrit. We only rely on lost in translation documents by others. Similarly, medieval India, you need to know Persian, Arabic, and all these important languages. I don't know them in the manner that I can read the text. Sanskrit you can understand as any Indian can, but to actually be able to decode text, it's a different expertise. But this book was just an experiment to see, how much you can stretch your limits. But then, along with the classical languages, I think a lot of the literature was available in Indian languages,
Okay. Okay.
which, from Kannada to Assamese, the Burunjis of Assam, which documents the entire Ahom period of Assam, 600 years of Assam history, Tamil to Malayalam to all these languages, Marathi, to decode the lives of many of these people. So, and also oral traditions, oral narratives, folk art forms. There's a chapter on Rani Abbaka in the book where I actually participated in one of those Bhuta Aradhane rituals where Abbaka is invoked and then she talks about what she did and defeated the Portuguese. So I think it's a kind of a combined, putting together of folk lore, a little bit of oral history, folk narratives, art forms, and also textual information from different languages, going beyond the classical languages, certainly going beyond English. So that it's been a great experiment. But I'd like to go back to what is, I think, my core competence, which is to stick with early modern and modern Indian history, which is from the 17th century
Onwards.
onwards and thereafter. Yeah.
Yeah, but this book can't be really classified as being ancient or medieval or modern. And do you think this is another interesting way to write history books, like not sticking
Yeah.
to conventional narratives, conventional classifications
True.
that we find in textbooks, like only ancient or only modern or only medieval history?
Yeah, true. And another thing that I'd like to point out, Ankur, is that those who read the book will understand that all the invaders too, they find a place here. Whether it is the Arabs, later on the Turks, the Delhi Sultanate, all the Khiljis, the Tughlaqs, Lodhis, then the Mughals, the Portuguese, the Dutch, the French, the East India Company, they all find a place. This revisionist version of history where it says, let's remove this group, let's not even talk about it. I find that extremely foolish, extremely counterproductive. In my home state of Karnataka, there's constantly this talk that Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan should not be mentioned in the textbooks. And this is a lot of the government, the BJP government there, which talks about this, which I think is utterly foolish because you may not like Tipu Sultan, but you can't wish him away. He's an integral part of your past. Or any of these people, Lodhis, Khiljis, they may be barbarians, they may be marauders, but they are a part of your past. You can't wish them away. You have to show the good, bad, and the ugly of all of them. But can we narrate a different, can we flip the narrative of Indian history to take away the spotlight from them and throw the light on others who are actually heroes, where these people become peripheral characters.
Right. Yeah.
They just come and go by the way. But the actual people whom we celebrate, whom we give importance to, are the people who stood up to them, and not the people who came and defeated us or so on. So I think it's just a question of flipping the narrative of history and whom you give importance to. I think in my prologue I quote E.H. Carr, who says, history is nothing but what the historian decides to show. Right, or something to that effect. The exact words I don't remember, but this is the spirit of what he says, that a historian decides how they would like to present and what they would like to show. So if you flip the narrative of historiography and the line of the narrative, then a different picture emerges, and that will be different from what we have conventionally been taught as Indian history.
True, true. You've covered so many different personalities from different regions of India, like starting right from Kashmir, Lalitaditya Muktapi, to the south and to other places. Some of these characters were well known, for at least to me personally. For example, we knew about Banda Bahadur from the Punjab, and whereas some others, for example, Rajarishi Bhagyachandra Jai Singh of Manipur, or for instance, Velu Nachiyar of Shivaganga, were not so well known, I believe, in the popular discourse. So, when it comes to the availability of material, primary and secondary sources, on the lesser known figures. Was that a challenge as compared to the figures who were more well known?
No, I would have a slight disagreement on the first bit itself, that
Hmm.
how do we define what is well known? Because there's a Banda Singh Bahadur flyover, I think, in
Yes,
Delhi.
in Delhi. Yeah.
I've asked several Delhiites,
Yeah.
do you know who this man was? They don't know. They know
Okay.
the flyover is there.
Yes. Yeah.
Lucknow, there is a Hazrat Ganj. The
Hmm.
people, Lucknow people go and have papdi chaat, that basket chaat or whatever.
Hmm.
And they said, do you know Begum Hazrat Mahal?
Hmm.
They would know that she existed.
Hmm.
Well known, if you say their, at least their name rings a bell,
Hmm.
yeah, maybe they're well
Hmm.
known.
Hmm.
But do you know what their backstory was, where they came from, what was their claim to fame?
Hmm.
That is not really known.
Hmm.
Similarly, I mean, in different places, Martanda Varma may be known in Kerala, and the coastal regions of Tamil Nadu and Kerala, the border areas.
Hmm.
But beyond those borders, how many know of the Battle of Kolachal, and which he won against the Dutch?
Hmm.
So I think each person came with their own challenges.
Hmm.
That then that's why the regional literature in the language there
Hmm.
threw up a lot more information,
Hmm.
which then helped to reconstruct their lives.
Okay.
But yeah, the name itself may be Lalitaditya. I don't know how, young people or even those. I mean, Kashmir. If you think of, we hardly think of the Hindu past of Kashmir,
Right.
right?
Right.
The Lohara, the Upala, the Karkota
Karkota.
dynasties. Whereas that is the more than 500, 600 years of Kashmir history has been thoroughly documented.
Hmm.
First by Kalhana
Hmm.
in the Raja Tarangini, and then you had Jona Raja and so many others who added this thing to that addendum. Still, the occupation of Kashmir by Akbar
Hmm.
in, I think, 1576 or so, you have the entire history of Kashmir documented. But still, Rani Didda and all these people from Kashmir, I don't know if you maybe they've heard the name, but more than just the name,
Hmm.
so difficult to know a lot more.
Hmm.
Uh, Indore, when I went there for my research,
Hmm.
everywhere there is a ubiquitous, photo, picture. The airport is named after Devi Ahilyabai, and everyone knows her. Punya Shlok, Mata. That's how they call her.
Hmm.
But do they know her story? What all she went through? Why is she, the centerpiece of attraction in all over the city?
Hmm.
I'm not very sure whether that people really know. So
Hmm.
knowing a name uh, itself may not make them well known enough.
Hmm.
I think knowing the entire
Context.
context, why they became important, why is the airport in my city named after Ahilyabai Holkar,
Hmm.
that is, I think, a lot more relevant
True.
than sometimes just knowing the name.
Hmm. Right. Right. And coming to names, it must have been a challenge to select just 15 names. What was your reaction when you first dug into the archives and started selecting these 15 names?
So my idea was, one is, as I said, to cover the entire length and breadth of India,
Hmm.
particularly those regions which are not represented,
Hmm.
man-woman combination,
Hmm.
and also if you see that though each is an independent story, you can read any chapter without losing any continuity. Each is an independent chapter,
True.
but in chronological order, they cover the entire history of India, so to say, from the 7th century to 1857.
Hmm.
Through their life stories, you navigate the river of India's history.
Hmm.
So these are like padav, different milestones in the journey,
Hmm.
where you halt
Hmm.
in the 13th century, in the 14th century, in the 15th century, and each of them comes and talks about their narrative in that century and that geography.
Hmm.
So that linear structure to connect the 7th century to the 19th century and still have that common feature of
Hmm.
being resilient and brave and all that, that was important. But yeah, in the process, so many were lost, either because you can go on writing as many, 300, 400, 500. I don't know how many will be enough, because there are as many unsung heroes
Heroes.
and heroines. So at some point you have to stop. The book also has to be not become unwieldy and
Yeah.
huge and all of that. And some genuinely I didn't know of. And thanks to, I mean, social media, you get a lot of galis and all that. Sometimes for the good things also. Like a couple of them who, many people from Odisha, they messaged me or on Twitter and all these places saying, you haven't covered anyone from Odisha. And yeah, that is because just couldn't. And they gave me names like the Langula Narasingha Deva of the Gajapati dynasty there.
Gajapati, yeah.
And I think he built the Konark Sun Temple. And this man, unlike most of the heroes in this book who were defensive, when they attacked, they reacted. This man was proactive. Even
Okay.
before the attacks could happen, he managed to beat the Turks and so on. This was, I think, the 13th century. So then I was like,
Okay.
oh God, this is such a big miss. So I wish I knew about him. I honestly did not know about this person. So I'm sure there will be a lot of misses like this. But like I've mentioned in the prologue to the book, this is not the end to it. And I genuinely hope that the book and the theme actually spurs a lot more, writers, scholars, historians to access these untold stories and bring them out. I myself, my publishers have been asking me to come out with a sequel to the book.
Okay.
But then that will also cover another 15. So what about the rest of them who will still be, lost?
Right.
So I think there needs to be more and more such works which will bring out cases of genuine pride about ourselves, about our ancestors, their achievements, so that we as a nation, as a civilization and a people can stand up with our spine erect, with that modicum of confidence about ourselves and our achievements of the past.
That's interesting. There's one interesting theme that I noticed while reading the book was that so many kings are devoted to their family deities. For example, Martanda Varma of Travancore decides to dedicate his entire kingdom to Sri Padmanabha Swami,
Yeah.
and then you have uh, Banda Singh Bahadur, who issues coins in the Guru's name, not his name,
Yeah.
his
Guru Gobind Singh.
Guru Gobind Singh's name, and many other examples of uh, kings coming in the background and them projecting themselves as mere servants of their god, their family deity. And so, is this something that you find across other kingdoms also?
Not everywhere,
Hmm.
but yeah, certainly cases like
Hmm.
Martanda Varma, after so many victories that he got and unified the so many principalities within what is today Kerala,
Hmm.
to then dedicate all of that to Padmanabha Swami and say, I'm a mere Padmanabha Dasa.
Hmm.
That meant a lot, and I'm just a trustee who's running the show on your behalf. That was quite something. You see a similar spiritual, I think, underpinning to even Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj and the establishment of, the Hindavi Swarajya, the Maratha Empire, where, I mean, today people have different views. If you talk about Swami Ramdas and his role in Shivaji Maharaj's life, but then there was that spiritual element, whether it came from his mother Jijabai or from Ramdas. So I think these the spiritual factor which propelled a lot of kings, the Vijayanagar Empire too. I mean, it was established by Hakka and Bukka, but you had a Vidyaranya Swami in the background,
Right.
who was their spiritual preceptor who
Right.
helped establish this. And the idea was, so time and time again in our nation's history, I think spiritual gurus have played an important role when the society or the polity has been in decadence, to assume that mantle to inspire the political leadership to actually take up arms or to reform and all of that. And we see that all through, right from the early times to, as I said, Sri Aurobindo or Swami Vivekananda, Dayanand Saraswati, Ramana Maharshi, Sri Narayan Guru, all these, the entire, I think, list of everybody. I think that is
A
an
very
important.
important characteristic of Indian history.
Yes, true.
What would be one piece of advice that you would like to give to young scholars working on Indian history? How should they approach the subject, and what are the challenges that they're likely to face?
Challenges are plenty.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to scare them off with
Yeah. Yeah.
talking about the challenges, but
Yeah.
I'm nobody to give an advice, but if at all asked to, constantly the demonization that happens of leftist historians, and rightly so, for the distortions that they've done. I think the narrative needs to move beyond that. They did like this, they did like this one did like that, taking specific names. That is all fine. Everybody knows that. I think since the time Arun Shauri in that Eminent
Eminent
Historians
historians. Yeah.
book, I think he's laid bare, the modus operandi of all these characters. Professor Meenakshi Jain in her Battle for Rama, she has also spoken how the subterfuge that was done in the Ayodhya movement. In court, these people, so many of them who are still alive, have lied and so on. And nothing has happened to them. No one has taken them to task for such outright lies. But I think the time, all that is fine. You can keep scolding them. But what is the counter narrative? I think that is important. The only answer to that is scholarship, and more scholarship and more scholarship. If someone has written 10 books which are distorting your history, please write 100 books which counter that, rather than going on just cribbing about what they have done. That is their duty. They have done their dharma. Now you please do your dharma of actually countering that, and that needs to become a larger movement to those people for whom this country matters, to whom this civilization matters, and they're being small stones in that the Ram Setu being built to Lanka. You're all that squirrels who are coming and keeping little pebbles. I'm a squirrel, you are a squirrel, we're all little squirrels who are putting those pebbles. But finally, that Ram Setu has to get constructed. And in the process, I always maintain, especially to young people, that please read more of all ideological, tilts. Even if you don't agree to somebody's viewpoint, or if you think someone is having a political viewpoint which you don't agree, read that person. Unless you understand what your opponent has said, you cannot formulate a counter response or an argument to that. So reading, keep the windows of your mind open, as the Upanishadic this one goes. Let the best of everything come from all sides of the world, and then you make up your own mind. As I said, reading and understanding multiple perspectives and charting your own course. That is a very important perspective for any young person who is getting onto the track of historiography of India. Accessing as many original sources. So if the younger people can learn these languages, whether it's Sanskrit or Persian or whatever, and then access primary sources in their original, I think that will add a tremendous amount of value to the kind of work that they bring to the table, rather than rely only on foreign translations of the same book. So all these would be certain things that one can do if you have to do uh, really high class and objective research in the field of history.
And any reading recommendations for students to who might want to start learning?
Oh my God, there'll be so many of them. But at least my favorite historians
Right.
have been Dr. R.C. Majumdar
Okay.
and his 11 volumes of
Yeah.
Indian
History
history.
and culture of Indian
Yes,
people.
yes, that I think is quite a large, landscape that he paints. Sir Jadunath Sarkar, R.C. Majumdar, of course, and Ram Swarup, Sitaram Goyal, Dharampal ji,
Right.
whose work you have, accessed. People like this, there's a plenty, and now more recent times, people like Professor Meenakshi Jain, who also, have done a lot of interesting work. I've recently been reading her, what is that series of accounts of foreign chroniclers who came to India.
The
The
India
India
they
they saw,
saw.
yeah,
Yeah.
the India they saw, which is a very
Four
fascinating.
volume series
Yes,
by,
four
yeah.
volume series. And
Yeah.
her earlier work on Sati,
Yes. Yes.
and which kind of debunks the claim that Sati was a widespread, social evil and all that. So I think these are sufficient reading material for a couple of years at least. By then, some of us, I hope, we will keep churning out some of our own works with
Sure.
the modern
Sure.
times,
Yeah.
which again can become reading material for the future.
Yeah. I am sure you will. And with these words, I wish you all the best, Vikram,
Thank
and
you, Ankur.
I congratulate you once again on publishing yet another to be best-selling book on Indian history.
Thank you.
And it's really wonderful to have you here and to speak on such a wide range of issues and on this all important issue of rewriting history, as this is a pressing need of our time.
Thank you, Ankur. Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Namaskar. Namaskar.